Tov. Today's daf is daf Kuf Nun, 150, almost done. 150 Kuf Nun in Baba Basra, as we learn for Aliyas Neshama of Leah Bas Tzvi, and we learn also for the Schus of Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael and the Sunnah Batzar V'Shivya. May everybody be safe and come home safely. We're down to the two dots, about 2 lines before the lines get wide. 2-3 lines before lines get wide at the 2 dots there. Pshita, Amar Matatla plan. If a man says, I'm giving all my movables to Yankel, let's say I'm giving all my movables to Yankel, whether he's a bari, a healthy person giving him away, or whether he's a shemira giving him away just by just verbally. So when he says all my movables, call mani tashmishit tashmishtei kani. He acquires all his usable movables. Right? Regular movables means everything that's movable in your house. The bar mechiti, sorry, we're not talking about wheat and barley, things like that. And that would exclude also animals, let's say, right? Calls animals, that's usually what they think refers to that too. Anything that's movable, but you mean things that you use, household items, all kinds of household items, except for barley and wheat and barley, things like that. You don't think of that as movables. And the Rashbam says that also that would exclude animals, things like that. You don't think of that as regular as movables. If he says kol metaltli, all my movables, if he adds the extra word, everything I'm giving to Yankel or selling to him, then then even everything would be included: wheat, barley, animals, etc. Even the upper millstone of the millstone had like an upper stone and a lower stone. Even the upper stone also, because that's usually taken off and cleaned, etc. Except the lower millstone. The lower millstone is not permanently installed or attached to the ground, but it's usually not moved. It's usually left in place. If he says call the metaltal, if he says anything that's movable, and as if he just says my metaltal, and he means everything except for food and animals, things like that. If he says all my movables, it means even the upper millstone. If he says, and certainly the food, if he says anything that's movable, called dim metal, anything that could be moved, even the lower millstone would also be included. Okay, those are the general rules of nomenclature. What you use when you pardon?
That includes the slave.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about the slaves now. We're going to talk about the slaves. What is a slave? Iboilu, what is the status of the slave? Iboilu, here comes the question. Avda, kamakarka, or kamata. What about an eved? When you talked about movables, you were talking about, well, I wouldn't say inanimate, because we said just movables does not include animals, according to the Rashbam. If he says anything, all my movables, it includes even animals and food. If he says anything that's movable, even the lower millstone, which can be moved, is also included. What about slaves? Now, what about slaves? Is a slave like makarka or metal? So let's set right from the offset, right at the beginning. Let's take a look at the last tosis on the page, a small tosis. Avdika makarka dummy, oka metal dummy. We're asking about things that are halachas rabbanan, meaning when the rabbis made rules about what do you mean when you say something? Like first, when I say something, do I mean to include evidence or not? We're only talking about milat rabbanan, meaning halachas rabbanan. The rabbi set rules as to what a person means, or what he should mean, or what we understand him to mean. Avol b'milsa d'oraisa. But if we're talking about like a kinyan by d'oraisa pshita, discussion. Of course, we had many places throughout Shas that an evidence is compared to karkas. We says v'snachaltam osam lacharechem acharechem kasu is karka like land. So we know that karka, that animal, that avodim are compared to karka, and they're acquired the same way as karka. Kesef shtar chazaka. So certainly halachically, an eved has halacha like karka, and in terms of kinyan and in terms of halachas d'oraisa. Here the question is, when a person, what's the usage? What is the verbiage, as you might say? When a person says, I'm selling my metalton, doesn't mean to include karka, doesn't mean to include evadim or not. That's the question in the Gemara, in the third line in the Gemara. Let's bring a proof. Tashma mocha seir. Learn before, if you sell a whole city, a man owns a city, sells a city. Machar batim, includes the houses, meaning everything that's attached to the ground. Sells the houses, Shichin, the ditches, Ma'oros, the caves, Marchotzos, the bathhouses, base of Baden, the olive presses, base of Shluchin, the fields that need irrigation. Basically, you're selling anything which is attached to the ground. That means, anything where any fixed item. Avalo is a metalton, but not metalton. You're not selling movables. Let's say I'm selling you the city and everything that's in it. Even if there's animals or slaves, because they're in the city. If he says anything that's in the city. Now, let's understand this. If you say that avodim have halacha like metalton, when it comes to people's usage of the word, and I say metalton, and I mean to include eved, to say that evidim are like metalton, that's why when he first says, I'm selling you the city, all things attached to the ground, houses, fields, bathhouses, everything that's attached to the ground, I own that and I could sell that to you. So we understand why it's not, you don't include slaves. If you say that eved is like metalton when it comes to verbal usage, when it comes to when you say metalton and you don't mean to include eved, that's why the avodim are not included in the first part when he just said, I'm selling you the city. If you say that an eved is like karka, why wouldn't it be sold? If you say that eved is like karka, when I say I'm selling you the city, that means I'm selling you the houses, the ditches, the caves, the fields, bathhouse, anything attached to the ground. But if an eved is like karka, then eved should be sold too, assuming that the guy selling it owns it all. So there it's mashma that an eved is like metalton. It's more of an elamai metalton. If it's like metalton, then maya filu. Why did it say in the sefer? If he says I'm selling you the city and everything that's in it, afilu behemus, afilu hayaba behema avadim. What do you say afilu? It's metalton. So behemus and avadim. What do you say even? Just say behemus and avadim are included. Elamai, what do you have to say? What do you have to explain this? Why do you say afilu? The reason is because we understand everything that's in it is included. That means, things that are not movable, desks, chairs, things that are in the city that are movable, but they don't move by themselves. In other words, it's metalton, which is not movable. In other words, it doesn't wander around by itself, versus an eved which can walk around. That's why you say, if I sell you everything in the city, everything in the city, I know, cars, chairs, tools, whatever's in the city is included with the sale because I own everything and I'm selling you that. But the chiddush is afilu behemoth avadim, even the animals and the avadim which can walk around, they wander around, they're not fixed in a certain place. That's the chiddush. That's why he says afilu. So once you say that there's a difference between movables which are inanimate and don't move by themselves, and metalton, but they don't move by themselves, versus animals, human, and versus animate objects like avodim and behemoths, which can move around. So the chiddush is even that too. But you see, there's a difference between the two. There's a difference between movables that move by themselves, like human beings, like avodim and behemoths, versus items that don't move by themselves, like desks, chairs, cars, etc. So therefore, that's why he has to say afilu. Once you say that, there's a difference between movables that move by themselves versus movables that don't move by themselves. The truth is, you could say that avodim have halacha karka. The reason why he says in the Reisha, if I sell you the city, I sell you the ditches and the houses and the fields and all that, but not the avodim, even though avodim are like karka, but maybe I'm saying only items that don't move by themselves, like houses, bathhouses, fields, things like that. But avodim are like karka, but they're like karka, which moves, and therefore maybe he didn't mean to include that. So it's not a solid proof from there. If once you say afilu tema, you could say afilu tema karka, shining karka denied, and karka lo denied. There's a difference between karka, which moves around like slaves or animals, versus, animals for sure would not be considered karka because there's no pasuk for that. So there's no question about that. But as far as the slaves go, slaves move around. Therefore, they could really be karka, but they're karka which moves around, and therefore they might have a different halacha. That's what you would tend it in your mind. In other words, I said I'm selling you the whole city, and avodim are like karka, but I don't mean avodim. I don't mean karka that moves around. I mean karka that doesn't move at all. I'm living in Ravashi, so we're going to try to bring another proof from the case we had yesterday. We had this more yesterday. Tashma hakosef kol nechosav. If lavdo a man has slaves, Evet Kanani, and he has all kinds of assets. And he says to the Evet, I'm writing you a get shechur. I'm giving you a get, and I'm giving you everything that I have. Everything that I have. That includes you, that includes all my assets. Yasser ben Chorin, he goes out free because he just gave him his freedom. He's giving him everything that he has, including the Evet. Shiur karka kolshu. If he left over a little piece of karka, I'm giving you everything that I have except for one strip of land. Lo yasser ben Chorin, he doesn't go out free. Why? Because by karka, he could have meant the Evet himself. If I give you everything except for yourself, well, that means I still own you. If I still own you, you don't own anything. So So we said, why? Because karka can mean avodim. Rav Shimon disagreed. We had this at the end of yesterday's daf and the top of today's daf. Rav Shimon Omer la'olim ben chorin. No, he's free because when he says karka, he doesn't mean the evet. He's always free. Until he says, I'm giving you everything to my evet. Unless 1/10, I'm leaving back for myself 1/10,000 of my assets. You, the evet, could be 1,000 of my assets. If I talk about my asset, yeah, an evet is an asset, but he's not karka. Rashbam said yesterday, at the end of the last Rashbam on yesterday's daf on Amid Beis, Zim Shire Kolshu, Im Shire Karka Kolshu, the Shire, right, Lolam Ben Chorin, Im Shire Karka Kolshu, if you left Kolshu, the Shire Karka below Evet. Shiur, Shire, Stam. If he says Stam, I'm leaving something over, then I could have meant the Evet. But if I say I'm leaving Karka, you're not Karka. That 1/10,000 could be the Evet. So again, the Evet, if a man says, according to Rav Shimon, if a man says, I'm giving you my Evet, everything that I have except for some Karka, the Evet goes out free because the Karka is not the Evet. Unless he says, I'm giving you everything I have except for 1/1,000,000th of my asset. Well, you could be 1/1,000,000th of my asset, then he doesn't go out free. That's from Shimon's opinion. But as far as the Tanakama goes, Tanakama says, if I'm giving you everything except for a piece of karka, then it could be that the Evet is like karka, and therefore the Evet doesn't go out free, and therefore he doesn't get the assets, nor does he get his freedom. V'amar Bar Yosef, fourth line from the bottom of Kuf Nun Amid Beis in the Gemara. V'amar Bar Yosef, Amar Rav Elazar, also metalton Shiur eitzel Eved, also metalton Shiur eitzel ksuba. Oh, metalton is also like karka. When a man says to the Evet, I'm giving you everything that I have except for a piece of karka or except for some metalton, you know what? He could have meant the Evet there too. He could have meant when he said except for metalton or except for karka, he could have meant I'm leaving you for myself, meaning you don't get your freedom. Rav Lezer said, "Also metalton Shiur eitzel Eved, below also metalton Shiur eitzel ksuba." We mentioned that yesterday. We'll talk about it more on Amid Beis. If a man says to a woman, I'm giving you stripping all my assets, and I'm giving you metalton, that's not giving her, that doesn't, she's not Yotze, he's not Yotze giving her ksuba by giving metalton, because a ksuba is meshubah, is obligated by the karka, not by metalton. So when it comes to an Eved, we say if you left over some metalton, you could have meant the Eved. If you could have meant the Eved, I'm leaving that. But if I'm giving her the ksuba and I'm giving her metalton, some metalton in lieu of the ksuba, no, unless he actually paid off the whole ksuba. But if he said some metalton towards the ksuba, that does not absolve him of the obligation for the ksuba. Okay, but the Amalei Rav of Nachman said, my time. What's the reason why Rav Dimi said that metalton is like karka when it comes to the Eved? Eved metalton, because Eved is metalton. Metalton Avishir. I'm giving you all my assets except for my Eved, which is also metalton. Ksubasisha is obligated by, is mortgaged by the karka. The karkas, all his karkas is mortgaged to the ksuba. So metalton karka Avishir. If I owe you a piece of karka, unless I paid you off the whole thing, the ksubin, that was clear, and they were still married at this point. And he said, if I'm giving you everything except that I'm giving you some metal, I'm giving all my assets, so I'm giving you a piece of metalton, that does not absolve him of the ksuba. Ksubas isha is obligated by this karka, is mortgage based on the karka. And metalton karka lavishir, that's not leaving something over. It's not like I could say, well, I left you this karka, I left you the metalton instead of the karka. No, metalton is not meshubah to that. If he left her a piece of karka, then he can say, fine, that's how he paid off the ksuba. But if he left her a piece of metalton, no, metalton karka is not meshubah, so that doesn't absolve him of the ksuba. But in terms of our issue with the Eved, what do you see over here? The Rabbah said to Rav Nachman, what's the reason why Rav Dimi Bar Yosef said that metalton is also a shear by the Eved? If a man said, to the Eved, I'm giving you everything that I have except for karka. The Eved doesn't go out free. You know what? If he said I'm giving everything except for some metaltalin, also the Eved doesn't go out free, because maybe by metaltalin he meant the Eved. That's the point. Rav Nachman explained. Nighttime Eved is metaltalin. So what do you see when it comes to usage, verbal usage? Person, when he says a metaltalin, could mean an Eved. When he said karka, he could mean an Eved also. An Eved could be both karka and metaltalin. So here's a raya. Our question was, is Eved, when a person says metaltalin, does it mean to include an Eved or not? That's the question, right? The question we raised was that Eved, is the Eved like karka or like metaltalin? Which one is included? Well, how do you when a person says I'm giving away my metaltalin, does he mean the Eved? If he says I'm selling you all my karka, then we assume that an Eved is included too, because midaraisa, an Eved is like karka. But if he says metaltalin, what's the usage of a person? So he says over here, yes, the use of a person is when he says metaltalin, he could mean the Eved also. Omerlei. So Rav Ashi answered Ravina. Ravina was the one who pointed this to Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi brought a proof from this whole case that an Eved is really called metaltalin, meaning when he says metaltalin, he can mean to include the Eved. So Ravina answered him, no. Well, I'll tell you that it's really like karka, right? But what does it mean? Also metaltalin shiur etzel Eved? Not because of Rav Nachman's reasoning, because an Eved is metaltalin. No, that's not the reason. It says Rashbam Omerlei again. So Rav Ashi answered Ravina at the top of my base now. We look at the reason why the Eved doesn't go out free when he says, I'm giving you everything except for some metaltalin. It's not because the Eved is included metaltalin, but simply because it's not a complete cutting off. In other words, Rashbam says like this, at top of Rashbam on Amid Beis. Eved Gomer Lo Lamisha. We learn now that an Eved is like a woman in terms of gittin and things like that, certain halachas. He owns his wife and he owns the Eved. And you learn out, because it says law by both of them, so there's Xavier Shabbat. The be'ina and get creases. You need a get. How do you free a slave? You just can't say you're free. You have to give him a get. You get creases. Keeping the Yesh Labal Eved, since the master here is Chus B'Shtar, Shekosabo, because he writes in the star, I'm giving you everything except for something, except for the metaltalin. Not that the Eved is really metaltalin. That he's now discounting that. He's saying no. He's refuting this idea that when you say metaltalin, you can mean Eved. The reason why the Eved doesn't go out free there is not because maybe when he said metaltalin, he means Eved. No, metaltalin doesn't mean Eved. But the reason is because he left something out of the get. When you give a get to a woman and you say, listen, I'm divorcing you except for Mondays. On Mondays, we're still married. It's not a get, right? I'm divorcing you, you can't leave. It's got to be a total cutting off. Cruz got to be total cutting off. Same thing with the get here. When he gives him the get and he says, I'm giving you the get, I'm giving you everything I have, including yourself, except for something. That's not a good get. That's not a good get. That's what he means over here. And he says, the Kivan, the Rashbam in the second line, Kivan the Yesh Labala Evet Schus B'Shtar, Shekosabo, Sheshayir Karka, Umetalpin. Even if he left over karka and metaltalin atzmo, he's leaving something for himself, or karka or metaltalin. Lo hiknos hashtaligam, he didn't give it to him totally. Shigam schusad and kasabo. The master still has something in that. Hilkach lo karina bay get creases. It's like I said, I'm divorcing you except for Mondays, except for Tuesdays, right? So here also, if he tells the Eved, I'm freeing you except for Mondays. That's not a freedom. Here also, I'm giving you everything except for metaltalin. It doesn't mean that the Eved is included in the metaltalin. Or in the karka for that matter. We're not saying the reason is, he says, we learn the reason why he doesn't go out free is because it's not a proper get. Hilkach lakarina by get creases. Kenyans that pirush both sides, shabalusta, whatever that is. V'gam yesh lefarish kach lolam evda kima karka. You could say Eved is like karka. V'gabegera my chashvin lafil metaltalin shiur. Eitzel Eved. High in the time Shim decrease. I'm reading the Rashbam in the narrow lines. Shim decreases gomer bein. You need a total cutting off, a total withdrawal. The Kivan Shazeh Shire Metalton, Man since he's leaving over some Metalton, Man Lay Malon, who's going to tell us the Lohaya Bedai told the Shire Evet? Maybe he also meant Evet Bechlala Metalton. Achre Shalo Pirish Metal. I didn't say which Metalton. Shashar Afagav the Beduch Achrina Evet is like Karka. Miugabi creases, love creases. It's not considered a proper cutting off. So we don't know what he means. That's the issue. It's almost like, we don't know what the question was. Is an Evet like Karka? I don't know if it's like, or Metalton. Well, it may not be like metaltalin, but we don't know what he means. In this case, though, the reason he doesn't go out free is because it's not a proper get. Just remind before we go on to the next piece, remember yesterday we were talking about the famous case of Isser giving the money to his son, who was his biological son, but he had his son was conceived when Isser was still a goy, and he had married Rachel, the daughter of Shmuel. Rabbi had that whole story, and he wanted to give him the $12,000 that he had at Rava, and Rava was saying, well, how could he acquire it? Yerusha, he's not about Yerusha. Matana Shchimera is Yerusha Shavir, right? So wherever you could have a Yerusha, you can have Matana, otherwise you can't. So Kol Echad Isa Yerusha Isa Matana. Matana. What about Chalipin doesn't work because it's coins. Agav Karka doesn't work because he didn't own any Karka. If it's Mamit Shloshan, I'm not there. So it doesn't work. So Ravika Rami said to Rava, why can't he just be Moda? Remember, he said if a Shemira is Moda, that this money belongs to somebody else, we believe him. And he goes, somebody else. So then Rava said, oh, look what you've done. Then as soon as he said that, the word got to Easter that's how you could do it. And Rava got upset. And he said, oh, look, you're giving, you're explaining, you're giving people legal excuses how to get around it. And Rava apparently didn't get the money. So the question was, we raised several questions here. One was, how could Rava be trying to give away the money that really belonged to Isser and he wanted to give it to his son? Those are questions. So it could be, as far as that goes, so we said he wanted to give it to Tzedakah. Some say, I think it was in the name of the writings of the Chazon Ish that somebody quoted there, I think they quoted Rav Ovadia Yosef, who said that Rava wasn't serious. Rava was just debating the issue in the yeshiva. He said, okay, theoretically, he wasn't serious. He was saying, look, okay, we got the situation here. How can he acquire it? How can he acquire it? He can't get a Yerusha because he's not really the son, halachically, right? And you can't do Shchimera because only Kol Echad Is Yerusha, Is Matana. And all these other things would work. He was debating it until somebody said, oh no, but he could work with Odessa. So he was just debating the issue. It was just a theoretical, a Talmudic exercise. And it wasn't really serious. He wasn't trying to take away the money. That's his answer for that. But as far as what bothered me more yesterday, I think we mentioned it, was that we said, since he's not a Baal Yerusha, he can't do it Matna Shchimera either. Why? Because Matna Shchimera, the rabbis made, is like a Yerusha. So wherever Yerusha applies, Matan also applies. And we said, when we learned it, we said, okay, and he's not a Baal Yerusha because he's not really, he doesn't have a father, really doesn't Yerusha. But I said he could inherit from his mother, right? He's Jewish. He was born Jewish. Get inherit from his mother. So Tosas really explained. I saw this now. Tosas says, take a look at Tosas back on yesterday's stuff. He says, nearly Dimaya Bunim. If the ger Isser had other children, Isav Matnashav, he could. Alphagav the Makabo ger the less of Yerusha. Dala no saying who dika paid the V'la Makabo. When we said Kolechet Isav Yerusha, Isav Matana, we're talking about the father Isser, not about the boy. Not about the son of Mari. Talking about the father. If the father is in the parsha of Yerusha because he has children, then he can do it also as a matana. In other words, the father, who's the one who's giving it away, right? We're saying, why can't the father give it away as a matana shchimira? So he says, well, since he's not about Yerusha, he's not about matana either. So we said, yeah, but the son could get a Yerusha from his mother. He's in the parsha. The kid was born Jewish, right? Kid was born Jewish. He was Rav Meir. In fact, he was a rabbi, right? He was born Jewish. So he's in the parsha of Yerusha. He just doesn't have a father to inherit from, but he can inherit from his mother, right? No, exactly. So that answers the question that a shchimera can give sitan to anybody, right? The shchimera can give to anybody. It doesn't have to give that. So he said if it's going on this Kol Echad Yerusha, if he can give it to the son, if he has sons to inherit him, then he can give him a ton. Why? I thought Shemira can be given to anybody. That's what we said. And we said some Rishonim learn differently based on that. But here now, Tosas gives us the answer. What's going on here? When we said Kol Echad Yerusha, is the father capable of giving Yerusha? If the father Isser had no other children, except for this biological son who's not really a Jewish son of his, if he had no other children, he can't give Yerusha to anybody because he's a ger without any Yorshim. A wife doesn't inherit, even if he married Rachel, even if he subsequently had a proper kedushin and all that, wife doesn't inherit. So this ger has no yorshim. We always say throughout Shas, a ger has no yorshim. What happens if a ger dies? Anybody can claim it, right? Well, if a ger was Megayer and he had Jewish children afterwards, those are good children. We're talking about the ger has no other children. So Tosa says we're speaking about where the ger Isser had no other children, so he has no heirs. He's not in the parsha of Yerusha. A man like that cannot give Matan Shemira either to anybody else, because since the Chacham said Matan Shemira is a special lachat rabbanan. Mina Torah, you have to give something properly. Give a get, you give a star, a kinyan. You have to do something properly. Rabbis made a special dispensation. A man's on his deathbed, he's dying, or he's about to be killed, or whatever, and he's upset, and he doesn't have time to write things down and to make a kinyan and all that. And we said so that you shouldn't bother him. Whatever he says is done. Okay, but the rabbi said that's like a Yerusha. The gift is like a Yerusha. So if he can give a Yerusha because he has children, then he can give a matana to anybody. That answers this explains Shiftos answers that question too about can't the Shemar give it to anybody? Yes, but he has to be in the parsha of Yerusha. He has to have heirs, Heirs, right? He has to have heirs, otherwise he can't. So I just wanted to point that out. That Tosas is very important. It settles that issue. All right, back to our topic on Kuf Nun Amud Beis.
A quick question.
Yeah.
A get shiur for an eved.
Yeah.
There's no specific language for it.
No, there's no specific language
Not like
for
a get for an isha.
Get for an Isha. Also, there is specific language, but it's not like the whole thing is listed. Like every word, it's not like a pasuk in the Torah. Every word is listed. It's like you have to say, you have to be very clear that it's a total cutting off. In other words, I'm not sure that every get in the world that was ever done. I mean, we said it has 12 lines and all these kind of standard things, and there's a tophus and the Torah, right? There's a boilerplate and everything, except for the names and the dates and things like that, which the Torah is the tophus always exactly the same. Yes, there is a comment, different rabbis have written, but I don't think that there's nowhere in the Torah where it says it has to, these are all the words of the get. But the rabbi said, it's got to be very clear that he's divorcing her and all that, and that there's no connection. He cannot say, I'm divorcing you except for Mondays, can't do that.
No, so I was thinking if you give a get shiur to an eved,
Yeah.
and the wording in the get says, I am freeing you, and I'm giving you all my property except for. Then there are two different.
Yeah. Then it's two different. You could say that could be arguable, right?
The only question is when
because he says I'm giving everything.
you
Right. If he was clear about it, if it would be clear, then it would be a krus shafet, a krus get. Yeah. Okay. Amarava. Second line on Kuf Nun Amud Beis. Amarav Nachman. Chamisha. There's 5 things. There's 5 things when in transferring property, let's say, from one person to another. Let's use that. Not necessarily a gift, but there's 5 things that have one meaning when you're giving away some of your stuff, and have another meaning when you're giving away everything. In other words, he says there are 5 things that the rules that apply differently if you give everything away versus giving partial away. And until you give everything away, then there's different rules. And what are the 5 things? We're going to explain that Shemira, which we've already learned. Right, we've discussed that many times already. Mishnah said if you give away everything and you survive, you can get it back. If you give away partial, even if you change your mind in the middle, you gave some way here, we said partial, you can get it back. So Shemira, Avdo, giving everything to the Eved, as we just saw. If you give everything to your Eved, leave over nothing, he gets his freedom. If you left something out, I'm giving you everything except for, except for could mean anything, right? Could mean the Eved himself. Ishto, giving everything to your wife. What do we mean by that? We'll see. We had that case before. Ubanav, we had that case before too. And Mavrachas. Mavrachas is a woman who, as we'll see, is trying to shelter her assets. Now, what do we mean? We're going to explain in a minute. We'll get to that in a minute. What we're doing, shelter her assets. We'll talk about that in a minute. What's that? Shemira. The first one, Shemira, that we've learned. The Tan Shemira. We had that Mishnah earlier in the week. Tan Shemira shekosov kol nechosav lachem. Shemira wrote everything over to somebody else, gave away all his assets. For Shiur karkol, if he left a little bit, even if he survives, the matan is a gift because he didn't give everything away. Low Shiur karkol, because he didn't leave anything away. What I say, yeah, if he left over low Shiur karkol, if he didn't leave over anything, and then he survives, he gets it all back. In other words, Shemir is the first of the 5 things that makes a difference if you give everything away versus give away partial away. As we've said, right? If you give everything away and you survive, you can get it back because you only meant to give it away on the condition that you were going to die. If you survive, you can get it back. Avdo, case we just had, the Tanan, Hakos Kol Nechasav Lavdo. This is the 3rd time we've had it in the last blot, basically. Hakos Nechasav Lavdo. You give everything away to your slave. Yatz ben Chorin goes out free because you meant to include him too. Shire Karkosh, if you left over a little bit, Lo Yatz ben Chorin. And as we said, even Metalton also, right? If you left over anything, then maybe you meant to include, I'm not giving away the Evan himself. Therefore, he doesn't get his freedom. Ishto, we had that also before. If you gave away everything to your wife, a man has children, give everything to his wife is not his heir. Why would he give her everything? He didn't really mean to give her everything. If he gave her some assets, let's say a man says, he bought, honey, I bought you a new car, bought you a new stove, bought you a new refrigerator. Okay, that's hers. That's hers. He can give her whatever he wants. Give her money, give her cash. He didn't give away everything. But he gave everything away. He didn't mean to do that. We're saying the rule is different. Give everything away. He only made her a guardian for the children so that they should respect her. Okay. That's the third case. Banav, that's the fourth case. The Tanana Kosikol and the Chas of Labanav. Give everything away to your kids. For Kosikol Ishto Karkos. And he gave his wife also a little piece of land, a little piece of karka of the Ksubasa. That's in lieu of a Ksuba. If he gave everything away and he gave a karka. Now, here, there's a difference, though, because it's got to be karka, not metalton. He gave her metalton, and it does include it. So even if he gave everything away, but he gave her metalton, there is a difference there between metalton and karka. By the other cases that we said, it's everything. It's everything. If you go all your assets, if you're a shchimera, everything to the evet, everything distributed among, everything to the wife, everything, karka, metalton, everything, you only made her trupa, everything is included. When it comes to here, this case of if you distributed stuff to your children and you gave your wife a piece of karka, she's lost her ksuba because the karka is in lieu of the ksuba, even if it's a small piece of karka. That's dafka karka, not metalton. That's an exception. Mivrachas. Mivrachas is the fifth case. This is a woman who's sheltering her assets. What does that mean? So Ram says like this. Ram says a case of an almana. I don't know. It could have also possibly been, first marriage, but she had her own assets, whatever. Let's say a woman is an almana. I don't know why he gives the case of almana, but he says a woman's an almana and she's about to get married. She has assets. We call this a zivik sheni, right? And they come into the second marriages. They come into the marriage with their own assets, and she wants to shelter those assets from her new husband, right? So what does she do? She writes and she gives it all away to a third person. She has a friend, a lawyer, and she says, "I'm giving you everything, everything." She gives him some things, then it's a proper gift. But let's say she gives him everything. Why did she give him everything? Because if the husband marries the new husband and the husband survives her, he's going to get all her assets. So what does he do? She gives it to somebody else. Okay. So in that case too, Mivrachas, he explains the case in the Gemara. Let's see the Gemara. She has to write over everything. Meaning, let's say then the second marriage also gets dissolved in some way, a get, or he dies or whatever. Does she get back her assets from the lawyer? Well, if he's an honest lawyer, yeah, he'll give it back to her because he gave her everything. If he said partial, if she said I'm giving you some of these assets, so then maybe it's a good acquisition. She loses those. But if she gave away everything, just like that shchimera, everything, everything, she gave her everything, then she only meant to do it in order to shelter those assets from her second husband, right? Being very careful. We would call that today a prenup, right? Like a prenup. So she gave it away. If you did it like as a prenup, then everything. Right. In all these cases, if she didn't give everything away, she kept some metalton for herself, then it's a good, that's not everything. It's not considered everything. Except for the case of ksuba, because ksuba damakarki tekin rabbanan metalti lo tekin rabbanan. Because when it comes to ksuba is mortgaged by her, the property is mortgaged to her ksuba. So therefore, if by ksuba, in the case of ksuba, he gave everything away and he kept some metalton for himself, right? He didn't give everything away. That's not a shiur. That's not considered leaving over because the ksuba v'isha is only mortgaged by the property, not by metalton. So the metalton is not considered. And that's what he says. Metalton is a shiur. If I left over something, it's not everything. We say it has to be everything in all these cases. But metalton is not a shiur because the ksuba is not has nothing to do with the metalton anyway.
She's doing this, she's doing this after she marries.
No, before she marries the guy. No. This one, I want to talk about the ksuba here. This case is going back to the ksuba is the fourth case. When we talk about labami ksuba.
Oh, then we're going back.
With the fourth case, yeah. He says on all of them, in all these five cases, metatla v'shir l'bam ksuba the markarka come, because in the case of ksuba, leaving over metatla doesn't mean that she gets her ksuba, that doesn't affect the ksuba. If she gets karka, we said if he gives her karka kolshu, she's lost her ksuba. If he gives her metatla, she's not. But he says kol nechasav, if he left out the metatla there, doesn't affect the ksuba, because the ksuba is not related to the metatla, it's only related to the karka. But in the other cases, he says if kulu in all these 5 cases, metatla is considered leaving something out, so it's not everything except for the case of ksuba, because the ksuba anyway has nothing to do with the karka, with the metatla, rather only with the karka. Ameimer Omar, right? Ameimer says no. Even in the case there, metalta, if the ksuba says specific metalta, I'm giving you in the ksuba the $200, I'm giving you this metaltlin, and it's there, this menayu, have a shear. So if he left that is a shear, and that wouldn't be considered ksuba, even if he gave her. In other words, if he says, I'm giving in the ksuba, not only is this property, real estate mortgage to the ksuba, but there's metaltlin written into the ksuba, and that metaltlin is around, and he left that out, then it is considered like that she wouldn't have lost her ksuba because he didn't give her everything, because something was left out, so he didn't give it all away. All right, that's the machloks about that 4th case. Omer, so here we have these 5 ideas that if you say everything like Veshchimira and Eved, giving everything to your wife, that means you only made her an apotropos, or if you divided all your assets among your children and you gave wife a piece of karka, that's it, because you gave everything away. We said according to the Tanakama, yes, but if you give everything away except for some metaltlin, that would not affect it. She would still get, there would still be, and he gave her karka, she'd still get, that would be considered ksuba. In the case of Mavrachas, where she's sheltering her assets from from her new husband. And Rashbam says in the case of an almana, she has nechasim. Maybe she got nechasim from her first husband. It could very well be. Maybe you're talking about almana because you're not talking about a regular case of a first marriage where the father is putting into the ksuba the assets. I don't know. It could be talking about a first marriage too, in theory, and she's sheltering her assets in this way. But again, sheltering the assets means she wants to get it back. So if her second marriage gets dissolved, so there we say, if you give everything away, obviously you meant to get it back. You mean to get it all back. You were just sheltering. If you give away partial, maybe there was a valid gift. Now the Gemara deals with, and this will take us into tomorrow's stuff also. What is considered assets, right? We say all my assets, these assets. What are assets? Assets can be metal. We said that, right? Assets. He says, Amar nechasei leplan. If I say all my assets go to Yankel, Eved ikr nechasei. An Eved is certain called nechasim b'tanan. How do we know that an Eved is called assets? Maybe you have to say specifically Eved or metalflin or karka. We said Eved is certainly like karka, but a raisa. How do you know that assets includes an Eved? The tanan kosim called nechasim lav. If you write all your assets, you have a yotzim and chorin, right? So he says all my assets. In other words, even though you didn't say karka, you didn't say metalflin, you just said assets, nechasim, all my possessions or assets. Right? Because he says if everybody agrees, if I write over all your assets to the Eved, he goes out free. That means he's included. Ara ikri nechasim. We know that land, this real estate is called assets. That nechasim sheish lemachrayas, which have achrayas, meaning they have an obligation. Niknem b'kesef shtar v'chazaka. And what do we talk about that? We mean karka. Rashbam says a nice word. He says, why is it? The tonight says nechasim sheish achrayas v'karkos achrayas kol milva. Every loan, the chov, uksuba. Everybody relies on real estate. If he ain't lake or shoulders, man, you can't burn them down. A house you can burn down. They burnt down the base of Mikdash, right? Half of them burn everything. They can burn down everything. Everything can be. The Twin Towers was burned down, right? But you can't burn down karka. You can scorch it, but it's still there, right? So therefore, that's certainly the chasim yesh lemachrayis, and that means karka. So we see that karka is certainly called assets. Okay. Glima, clothing, garments, is called the chasim, the tanan. V'she'ein lemachrayis, meaning things that are movable, including everything in your house, desks, chairs, clothing. Einik ela b'mashicha, you got to pull it. She'ein machrayis, we're talking about things that can be lifted or pulled. Zuzei chasim, cash is considered assets. The tanan. V'she'ein lemachrayis, niknim chasim sheish lemachrayis. Again, the same idea. Assets which are movable, let's say, which are not karka, are acquired with assets that have karka. Well, maybe that just means glima, like you just said. How do you know it means even cash? That that the chasam she'ein lam achrayis, like movables, are acquired with the chasam sheish lam achrayis. As we said, if you buy a piece of karka and I sell you a piece of karka and I sell you my car or my desk, when you acquire the karka, you get the desk too. How do I know it includes cash? Why? Like case of a famous story we have throughout Shas. Havali trace off it's always 12,000. I don't know why they always had 12,000. This is it, right? Rav Papa had $12,000 bechazoi in that place far away, and he wasn't able to go there. And Rav Shmuel Bar Acha was going there. So Akininu Nele Rav Shmuel Bar Acha Agav Asifa the Beisa, and he made a kinyan sudar, made a kinyan chalipin with Rav Shmuel Bar Acha, and he gave him the $12,000. How did he give it to him? He gave it to him with a kinyan, with a chalipin. He made a kinyan chalipin, and with that he was kona. Why? How you kona? You can't kona cash with chalipin, but he was kona. He gave him a piece of the threshold of his house, so he acquired some karka, and with the karka he got the cash. So here you see that the chasam shein lamachrayas are nicknamed with chasam shein lamachrayas. The chasam shein lamachrayas means movables. The chasam shein lamachrayas means the karka, real estate, right? So we said, okay, it obviously means movables like shirts and desks and things like that, things that you can move. How do you know it means cash? Because in this story.
You say what is not the chasam instead of saying what is the chasam. I mean, the chasam means everything.
Right. Okay. Everything, not everything in the world. Okay. Right. We'll see. So we'll see. So maybe there's something that's not included. Right. Okay. We'll see. Right now he's listing. How do we know each one is listed? Is quiet. Because how do you know? Okay. How do you know? Okay. You need a proof for that. Maybe cash is not nechassim. Nechassim means assets. Maybe he doesn't mean that. Maybe he means different things. You know, like today you'd have a lawyer writing what assets, which assets are included. So if he says assets, doesn't include, it includes real estate, it includes slaves, it includes movables in your house, and it includes cash. So what happened in that case? So Rav Papa gave Rav Shmuel Bar Acha the cash. How did he give it to him? They were here, they were in a different place. He made a kinyan sudar, right? Rav Shmuel Bar Acha, let's say, gave him a pen or a handkerchief, and in return, he gave him a piece of his house, a threshold, the doorstep, a tile or a blata, as we say, a balato, in his house, and with that he got the cash. He also, when Rav Shmuel Bar Acha went to that place and brought back the money, he went out to greet him until far. In other words, he was so happy that he went out to greet him because he was able to get the karka that way. Because the person who had the money, who was holding the money, didn't want to give it to Rav Shmuel Bar Acha because he wanted to give it to the owner, Rav Papa. But he had proof that he had made a kinyan, so you can acquire. So you see over here that you can acquire cash also with agav the karka. In other words, then the chasam shein lamachrayis, including cash, is nicknamed the chasam shein lamachrayis. What about a star? You would say includes everything. It doesn't include a star. A star, a piece of paper, also you can chasi. How? It's like Shnei Shtar is saying. Said there's two kinds of stars that he was describing. It doesn't mean there's only two kinds. There's many kinds of stars, but he's so many kinds. Hey, Omar, that's how he says, listen, Reuben says to Shimon, I want you to acquire this piece of land. I'm giving you this piece of land for Levi. I want to give it, and please acquire it for Levi. He wasn't here, but Levi wasn't here. So one, he says, listen, I want you to acquire the land, this field, Zelaploni, and write him a star also. Write him a bill of a gift, a deed, right? Give him a deed also. He can retract on the star, not give him the star, but he can't retract on the field. Because I said, I'm giving you the field, and he made a chazak on the field right now. He acquired the field for him. Once he acquired for him, he can't go back. There's no Indian givers. But he didn't write the star. He says, star, since he didn't write the star yet, he can go back on the star. Right? He can go back on the star. Rashbam says, right? Chozer b'shtar, mi'api koach the star, yochalachsbo, kozman shalanimsar star, lost with sin, give it to him. In other words, if Shimon acquired the field right away by locking up the door, locking the door of the field or whatever, so he made a kinyan right away, Reuben can't retract that. But if he didn't give him the star yet, he can retract the star. Chozer b'shtar, right? If he says, so chozer b'shtar and chozer b'sara, let's say he says, give him the field, al-manas, acquire from the field on the condition that you're going to write him a star, then chozer b'shtar b'misara. That means he hasn't acquired the field yet until he writes a star. So then if the star wasn't written yet, he can go back on either one, he can retract either one. That's the first case. Or there's the two cases. One case where he said, acquire the field for him and give him a star. Then he can go back on the star, but he can't go back on the field once Shimon has acquired the field, making a kinyan on it. Let's say he says, I'm giving him the field on the condition that you write him the star. then he can go back on either one because he hadn't given the shtar yet. There's a third case also I'll add here. What's the third one? The first two, like you said, I agree with those two. Idach, I'll tell you this one. A man wants to sell a field and he's looking for a buyer. And he knows when he might get a buyer, might meet him in the street somewhere, and the guy will have cash, but he has to write a shtar. He has to write him a bill of sale, a deed. He has to give him a deed. He might not find the sofa there. They weren't all literate. So what does he do? He has the bill of sale written out in advance. All you got to do is fill in the name. Give bill of sale written out in advance. Or maybe it's a bearer bill of sale. Let's say the seller went ahead and had a shtar written in advance. He doesn't even have the buyer yet. But he said, I want the shtar handy so that if I meet the buyer and he has money, I'll give it to him. Kosa Shini, like we've learned, the top of Kufnan Alf. Kosa Shtar L'mocha, you can write a shtar from the mocha, Fishain Lokechimo. It's very difficult. A sofer should not, let's say a guy says, I'm thinking of lending him money. Write down a shtar that I wrote, that I lent money to this guy. You can't write something like that. It didn't happen yet. It's you're maybe taking part in a scam because maybe he didn't lend him the money. Only if he lent him money. But if it's a bill of sale, or a gift, even though the lokech's not there because the mocher's taking the risk. I'm planning on selling this field to Yankel. So write a shtar that I sold it to Yankel. So okay, he can write that because what's the chance that he might write the shtar and there'll be Adam on it and they'll find it and Yankel will find it and he didn't actually go through with the sale? Well, that's the mocher's option. If the mocher says I'm selling him the field, even though he hasn't sold it yet, it's the mocher's loss. If he wants to take that risk, he can do it. So Kosm Shalom Mocher Afishain Lokechim, the lokech's not there because it's his risk. It's the mocher's risk. He's saying, but let's say now Yankel buys the field and he made a chazaka, nik the shtar he gets the shtar with it. Why? Because wherever the shtar is may be back in his desk. But if he actually made the kinyan, made the deal, and the guy paid for it, he made a kinyan on it. He gets when he acquires the karka, he gets the shtar with it. V'zui sheshanina. This is an example of what we learned. The chasim she'ein le machrayas. The shtar is nachem she'ein machrayas. Niknim chasim she'ein le machrayas because shtar chazaka. When you make a kinyan on the field, like I said before, you get the car with it, or the other movables with it, or the cash with it. You get the shtar with it too. This proves that a shtar is also in the chasim she'ein lehem machrayas. So it's also neches. So this proves that a shtar is also a neches. It's also a possession and asset. All right, tomorrow's daf we'll pick it up from the 5th line here, behema. As we see, behema is also considered nechasim. We'll go through other things which are considered nechasim. The question is, what about items that you might not think are nechasim? Is that considered neches? Also, tomorrow's daf will be on the podcast, and on Sunday, Mir Hashem, daf Kuf Nun Beis, we'll start from the very beginning of the daf, the very top of the daf on Kuf Nun Beis. Shabbat Shalom l'kulam.
Shabbat Shalom. Was a bond considered